was talking to people last night, and you know something, when I go out, sometimes I think I don't go out often enough. Sometimes at my age, you get isolated and you spend a lot of time on your own, a lot of time reflecting on the meaning of life, and you're not communicating with other people as much as you should be. And I think that sometimes in rural Ireland that happens a lot. And I think it can even happen when you're happily married and you have a beautiful wife, partner, husband, whatever. A person, and I think men in particular, but I don't think it just applies to men. I think that all of us sometimes can get isolated in our own bedrooms or in our own apartments, and we just don't communicate with other people the way we should. I feel that now about myself, and it struck me last night because I went out socially with two wonderful people, so two people that I know, friends for many years, a couple, with a great old chat, and I had 3 pints of Guinness over the whole evening, and that was very pleasant. But what I noticed was, when it came to certain political positions, there was a huge difference between my views and their views. I noticed like that, well, without going into the details politically, but my ideas seemed very eccentric, do you know what I mean? And I would say particularly to do with the idea of religion. So I'm here with you and I'm talking about faith. I'm talking about solitude. I'm talking about the beauty of meditation and how, when you are meditating, you find a threshold. You find a threshold beyond which you go within yourself. And it's like you realize that you're no longer the ground of your own being. You're no longer the autonomous, unchangeable reality that you thought you were. You begin to realize that you have a consciousness that's watching you, that you're watching yourself, you're observing yourself all the time, and you notice that yourself always changes. You be in good mood and have a great desire to belong to a certain moment in time that'll make you happy, like sitting around the dinner table with friends, and then somebody says something and you kind of feel hostile, and it's like you're overtaken by negativity. And then instead of feeling desire and happiness in the company, you feel anger and you feel, I don't like this person. And how could you be one person 1 minute, like happy and almost in love with the company you're with, and then the next minute to be negative and angry and feeling like the last people you want to be with are these people? And I think the same happens to me 10 times a day. I think when I'm going down the street and I'm in a particular mood, I'm often triggered by the weather, to be honest. And I know that that's true from childhood, because all my life I could feel a sort of melancholy would come over me with bad weather. Now, what I mean is like cloudy, rainy weather, when I was expecting sunshine. And I know that it used to happen to me for years in the afternoons. So about 2, 3, 4 o'clock of an afternoon, I would feel so sad, so melancholic, so lonely. Be a mood that just come on me. And I think as I grew older, like into old age nearly, I began to realize it's the weather. It's actually the weather. Because unconsciously I'd be so looking forward to a blue sky. There's one this morning, by the way, beautiful blue sky. And the weather forecast, I was just listening to it, said that later on in the day, afternoon, it will be cloudy. And that transition used to really disturb me. And I wasn't aware that the weather was doing it, but I was aware for years of this pattern of sadness in the afternoon. Oh, I would find it unbearable. Now, the great thing is that since I've become aware of that, it doesn't happen anymore. Since I've become conscious of it, it doesn't happen now at all. When there's a blue sky like this morning, I rejoice in it and I embrace it, and I'm very happy. It kind of puts me in a good mood. And then in the afternoon, if like today it'll probably be cloudy, I'm kind of becoming aware of the half light, the kind of weakened light in the sky, and the way that there's no kind of sharp brightness on anything you're looking at when you're walking down the street. But now, what happens in those moments, I go into an act of remembrance. I'm thinking, these are the spaces within which I used to be melancholic. And I'm no more melancholic now at all. I think, to be honest with you, that in itself, for me, is a miracle. That's what I call a miracle. That in some way things have changed so profoundly that my emotions are not pulling me down. And that's what I mean, when I say that the more you become aware of yourself, the more you become aware of yourself as something that's changeable, that's triggered by emotions, that is dragged up to a very high happiness and then down into a very low loneliness. And the more that happens, the more you become aware of it. You find a kind of an equilibrium. You're kind of aware of your body. You're aware of your breathing. You're aware of not just the thoughts going through your mind, but the emotions going through your body. It's a fair way to put it, that the emotions go through your body and the thoughts go through your mind. So you become more aware of it. You become more conscious of all the stuff that's passing through you. The connectivity between you and other stuff that runs ripples of emotion through your body. And sometimes runs really nasty thoughts through your mind. Like, I don't like that guy. Or I'm very angry with this, that, or the other. You become conscious. And the wonderful thing about that is that you begin to see that there is no self. When you're watching yourself, you realize there is no self. And I'd be glad to say, as far as I'm concerned, that's one of the most major teachings in Buddhism that you'll ever find. I mean, that's Buddhism in a nutshell. The non-existence of self. They talk about it a lot in Tibetan Buddhism. That yourself doesn't exist. How is yourself? Somebody might say to you. Yourself. How is yourself? And the profound teaching of Tibetan Buddhism is, well, yourself doesn't exist. Yourself. What is yourself? So we're living in the day-to-day, and we're living as these emotions ripple through us and as these thoughts run through our heads. And they're triggering us all the time to a sort of awareness that's attached to stuff. An awareness that's full of either hatred or desire. We move from second to second feeling, I love this moment. I'm looking forward to me breakfast. I hate rashers. I don't like mustard. There's a lovely person. There's an awful person. It's a long road home. I'm very tired. They're like thoughts. I'm naming them, but I suppose I'm naming emotions there. I'm trying to kind of give a sense of what it is, the fluidity with which emotions run through us. And that's Tibetan Buddhism. Just to say the self has no autonomy. And yet we cherish this self. You know, we talk about the self like, I am the absolute one that you should listen to. I am the one. I am terribly important. We go around with a kind of a framework or a lens where we watch other people, but we're watching them in terms of, well, I'm the most important one. The ego, the me, the I. And yet, again, as you say, in Tibetan Buddhism, the non-existence of self, it doesn't actually exist. It doesn't have... It's not a delusion. Like, yourself is not a delusion. You are there. But you're more fluid than you think. And the sort of determination of what is you, what is yourself, is fluid, and more fluid than you think. I always find it amazing, you know, in the teaching of non-violence, and I'll just say that now, what non-violence is to me. Okay, non-violence is that you don't hit anybody, that you don't kill anybody, that you don't use violent language against anybody, that you don't harbour negative thought about anybody. And for me, that's the last one, which is the most important. That you're not negative. I'll give you an example. There's somebody, let's say, in my life whom I don't like. I never got on with, and years ago then, let's say I had an argument with them about something in particular. Maybe, you know, they sold me a car for a certain amount of money, and there was something wrong with the gearbox, and I didn't know about it, and I felt they cheated me. Now, I don't go back to them and say this. I don't go back and confront them because I'm afraid that maybe I'm not entirely right. Maybe they did it by accident. But I still feel this sense of resentment and hurt and anger against them. And I hold it for years. Now, this is what we all do. I find it, there's no point in me denying this. We all do a thing whereby we hold resentments and negative attitudes towards other people for years. For years and years. And sometimes we actually kind of collect people in groups. You know, we kind of synthesize that crowd of people I don't like. This crowd of people I do like. So imagine I'm like that. And imagine that if anybody says that person's name, I suddenly find an emotion rippling through my body, like an emotion of just, I don't know, anger, like, for no reason. Somebody who doesn't know that I ever met that person is talking in a group and around the dinner table, let's say, and they mentioned that they bought a car from this guy yesterday, and oh, he was so helpful. And inside me, I'm just like rippling with anger. I'm not saying anything. I'm clever enough. It's a funny thing, isn't it, that with anger sometimes we're clever enough to hide it. And there's a great Buddhist saying, I've quoted it before. Anger is the only poison you drink yourself and think that it's going to kill your enemy. Because what we do with anger sometimes is we know it's unacceptable, so we bottle it up, we keep it inside. But we don't let go of it. We kind of cherish it inside. It's like some precious ointment we have sitting on a shelf in the back of our mind. A bitter poison called hatred, negativity. And once we have that there, and we put somebody's name on it, it's like we're selective that some particular person I do not like. And then everybody else now I love. I'm compassionate to everybody. I'm kind. I'm a good Christian. I'm a good Buddhist to everybody. And I'm generous to people in need, and I kind of give to charity. I'm a really good person. And then there's one little bottle of poison on the shelf in the back of my head. and it's got somebody's name on it. And it's like, I'm 99% good, but don't ever talk to that fella. Don't ever talk to me about that fella. And I'm at the dinner table some night and I hear his name mentioned and somebody praising him, saying, oh, he's a great man to buy a car and give you a good car, great car dealer. And I'm thinking, the bastard. But I don't say it. I just let it ripple around my body. And that's like drinking poison. It's like, I think sometimes there have been times where I felt like that and it hasn't done my health any good. It would make you ill, that kind of holding on to resentment, holding on to negativity. So when I say that there's a sort of resentment in me, then letting go of it, for me, is the most powerfully helpful form of non-violence that I can imagine. Because when I think of Buddhist non-violence in other terms, like in terms of not going to war or not killing somebody or all the rest of it, well, I agree with that, but I mean, it's not something that's going to happen to me. I don't think I'm going to have ever a moral issue in my own life about whether I should go to war and get a gun or kill somebody. But the other is just as important. In other words, the violence that I nurture and hold like it was an ointment in a little precious jar on the back shelf in the back of my head with somebody's name on it, that kind of tiny, specific micro-negativity, micro-hatred, reserved for just one person, and then all the rest, I'm like the loving Christian. And then one person, I don't like him, and it's like there's no negotiation about that. I really don't like him. That's violence. And if you said to me, will you come out for dinner with this fella? Well, I'd be thinking, first of all, well, I will, but, I'll have a list of things to attack him with. I'll wait till we get into the middle of the dinner, and then I'll, metaphorically hit him with a hatchet in the back of the head. But if I was to go out to dinner with that man and listen to him like I was his friend, if I was to fake it until I made it, in other words, pretend I'm a friend, and genuinely listen to him, and genuinely try and understand the depth and breadth of his humanity, I know that before the dinner would be over, I would like him. And I would feel my negativity dissolve. It would be like somebody in the back of my head took that little bottle of poison, that little bottle of negativity and hatred that I had reserved for this person, and just dissolved it into the air. And I don't know if you've ever been in that position, but if you have, you will know that the ripple of relaxed, calm abiding that runs through your body from your toes up to your nose is astonishing. When you release yourself from a negative emotion that might have been sitting inside you for decades about some particular person, and I don't mean that you just forget about it. You can run away from people because you don't like them, and you forget about your negativity to them because you're living a life elsewhere and you're getting on with your life. But 20 years could pass. If you meet that person on the street, the same bristling negativity will arise inside you because you're holding something in the back of your head, that little jar of poison. What I'm saying is that if you engage with that person in a way that was loving, that was kind of really trying to listen to their side, it's very, very hard. I mean, it's very hard to, when you listen to somebody who's politically on a different level than you are, it's nearly impossible to hear them like you're agreeing with them because you disagree with them. Well, at an emotional level, I think it's even deeper. When you're emotionally negative and hostile to somebody, when you feel that person is bad for me, don't like that person, it's very difficult to be positive to them. But I think that is the essence of Buddhist nonviolence. It is the changing in your heart of the negative attitude. Body, speech and mind. So you don't do anything with your body which is negative, like killing, and you don't do anything with your speech, like malicious gossip or telling everybody you know somebody who, is a car dealer but he's dishonest. Body, speech and mind. It's in the mind where we cherish negativity against somebody else. And the way to dissolve it, if you like, the antidote, that's the way they say it in Tibetan Buddhism, the antidote, you know what I mean? Like it's like the antibiotic, or it's like what the tablet you take to push it the opposite direction. So the negativity in the heart would be seen in Tibetan Buddhism as a poison. And that would be making you ill. And so the doctor would give you an antidote, give you something to sort of dissolve that poison and make you feel better. And there'd be two levels of the antidote in this regard to, negativity or hatred for somebody. And one would be if you had the opportunity to share with them, and if you were going to listen to them in a loving and caring way and see the world from their point of view, and just become aware of them, just pay attention to their self. That would be a really good way to do it. A really active, dynamic way to sit physically with somebody, look in their eye and get over your negative view of them and begin to see who is in front of you. A human being with their own struggles, their own sincerity. And you don't judge them, you just kind of allow their presence to become beautifully sacred in front of you. Okay, so that's one way of doing it, and the point is that you may not often be in a situation when you can sit down with the person you don't like, because the person you don't like is usually a person that you avoid. So how do you do it then? Well, the trick, if you like, is to do it mentally, to do it visually. And this is really the core of Tibetan Buddhist practice. When you sit down to meditate in the ordinary sense, you can sit down on your own, and sometimes it's good to do it alone, and you become aware of your breathing, or you become aware of your body, or you become aware of a candle, and you just try and calm the mind. In Tibetan Buddhism, you very often visualize what they call the merit field. And the merit field, it's like a kind of a magnetic field, if you like. It's a poetic image, but it's like a field of goodness. And that merit field is the various deities within the Buddhist tradition that you would be using in your teachings or in your lineage. So let's say the great Buddha image, Shakyamuni Buddha, or Tsongkhapa, the great teacher in Tibet, or Manjushri, the great Buddha of wisdom. These are all icons. And you might have a photograph or a beautiful tanka, a wall hanging of one of these deities. And so the first thing you do in in Tibetan Buddhism is usually to visualize the merit field, so that you visualize this image of the Buddha of wisdom or the Buddha of compassion as being present to you, as floating in the air on fluffy white clouds and approaching you, coming from an infinite distance, a distance, from the farthest ends of the universe. You visualize this Buddha coming to you and being present to you, floating on fluffy white clouds, right there in front of you now, just present to you. The Buddha of wisdom, or the Buddha of compassion. And you're visualizing what you become familiar with if you look at an image of that Buddha. So you find a tanka, or you find an icon or a statue of the Buddha. But in your practice then, in your meditation, the first thing you're doing is visualizing the presence of that Buddha coming from very far away, from an infinity of distance, and yet coming to be present to you. It's not unlike what they say in Islam, when you walk towards God, then God runs towards you. It's the same kind of idea of the Buddha coming towards you. It's not that we turn to the Buddha, it's that the Buddha comes to us, arises within us. And so there he be, the Buddha, visualized in your imagination, on a throne perhaps with cushions, on a lotus petal, there floating before you, the great Buddha, the merit field, the source of all goodness and wisdom and joy and love, is there before you. And the second thing that you do generally in this kind of meditation is that you visualize people around you. I think that's probably different from the way that it's approached in Christianity. In the meditation session in Tibetan Buddhism, you visualize the merit field, the presence of your mentor deity. And if you were a Christian, it could be Mary, the mother of Jesus, it could be Jesus Christ, it could be some saint. So that the process of that visualization, which they use in Tibetan Buddhism, can be translated into our culture. I'm speaking as an Irish Christian. It can be translated into our culture by using the same structure imaginatively, but using it with Jesus or with Mary or with St. Francis or what's his name, Padre Pio, that you imagine them coming from a great distance, from an infinite distance, from really cosmically infinite distance. As if there was some great heaven, imaginal realm where they all were absorbed in the Godhead, and in this moment of prayer, they're making a kind of a Star Trek journey, if you like. They're making this massive journey across the cosmos, not at the speed of light, but infinitely faster than the speed of light. They're making this journey through time and space to be with you, to be present with you in this now moment. This now, this sacred now, this precious being here now. Oh, that's what I come back to all the time in this podcast. Be here now. And experience that wonderful sense of a deity, whether it be in the Christian tradition or any other tradition. In Tibetan Buddhism, it would be, let's say, for me, the Buddha Manjushri, the Buddha of wisdom, or Shenredzi, the Buddha of compassion, or Vajrapani. Vajrapani is the third great Buddha that I find powerfully helpful. Vajrapani is the Buddha, the diamond jewel slayer of darkness. It's the Buddha that destroys anything negative or evil within you. So one of those Buddhas or some Christian icon, some Christian saint or deity, and it's like that first practice is drawing that presence, that image with your imagination and allowing it to be present before you. And the second step in this process is to imagine other people around you. And the way that's done usually is in a kind of a categorized groups. So what you first imagine is your parents, your family, close friends, relatives, friends, people you don't get on with, and strangers. And they're the groupings. So I begin to imagine around me, to visualize around me, in a circle, my mother, my father, even though they've passed away many, many years ago, and all the people of my family, my blood relations, my closest and dearest, wife and children, all around me. And that's one category. And then friends, just all the friends I have. But sometimes I can, in my imagination, put the friends on one side, like on the left-hand side in this circle, I can imagine the friends. Different mornings, if I was doing that as a morning meditation, well, different mornings, I would probably imagine different friends, depending on who's coming into my mind. And then, on the other side, I visualize people I don't get on with. And there's the crucial one. I actually visualize them. Those people that I really have a difficulty with, that I don't like, and I see them in my imagination sitting around in the circle with me. And every prayer and every ritual in Tibetan Buddhism that follows will always be a dynamic, if you like, of the Buddha in the center sending good energy towards me, and that will usually be visualized like a kind of a single line, like a tube of white light. I know this is very kind of science fiction-y, but it's beautiful in its imagery. It's quite extraordinary that Tibetans had worked out that kind of visualization hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So you imagine, let's say, in the heart of your mentor deity who is there before you, who has come a great distance to be with you, and there's like a powerful light, like a white light coming from the Buddha into you. You could imagine it coming directly into your heart. One place that they very often imagine it is coming to the crown chakra, to the very top of your head, and then flowing down as if it was going down through a tube in your spine, and then spreading out like into your whole neurological system of nerve endings, so that the whole light begins to gradually fill your entire body from the top, from the crown chakra, goes right through, fills every sinew, every muscle, every toe, every fingernail, and you become filled with white light, with great light, with the light of the Buddha. You're so filled with light that your body is as clear as water, clear as glass, transparent, translucent. And then within that practice, within that prayer, there will usually be a time where you begin to visualize that light within you going out in the four directions, going out like rays of light now going out from you exactly in the same way into the hearts and bodies and minds of everybody around you. And in that way, you are praying for people who are ill. You're praying for your family. And you're more especially praying for people that you don't get on with. And the way you're doing it is in a visualization. You're visualizing. You're using the power of your imagination to visualize somebody. First, the Buddha, or the mentor deity, or a Christian saint, or a divinity in the Christian tradition. And you're visualizing that person in front of you, coming from an endless and infinite distance through space and time to be with you. And there they are, floating above you, and then sending out this huge ray of light. A visual description, an imaginate description of their love for you. And it goes into you and fills you in a very detailed way into your whole body. You become aware of your entire body filled with light. And this is bouncing off you. From the Buddha to you, and then from you bounced off, so that it goes out in many different rays of light to every single person in the universe. Every single sentient being in the universe. Now you are becoming the Buddha. You are becoming the embodiment. And of course, that's usually the way all those meditations end. They end with a stage whereby you dissolve the Buddhas. So you have imagined this Buddha before you, or your mentor deity. For me, it would be Shenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, or Manjushri. And I have visualized them as an image in front of me. And what I've also done, and it's an essential part of the process of these meditations, I have also visualized other Buddhas in the form of that Buddha, a multiplicity of them throughout the sky. So not only am I seeing Shenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, before me, but I'm imagining that there are kind of, if you like, clones of that image, an infinite amount of them. Because what I'm trying to say or grapple with in that meditation is that the presence of God is just infinite. It's just like beyond my capacity to number it or limit it. So it's infinite. I always think this is very like, that wonderful prayer, the Deer's Cry by St. Patrick. He talks about Christ behind me, Christ above me, Christ below me, Christ before me, I think of that very much in the same tradition as the Buddhist, that it's the multiplicity of the presence. It's like no matter where you look, you find Christ. So if you make a visualization of Christ, it's not just one. You're not just saying, well, there's a visualization. It's like if I look to the north, the south, the west, the east, if I look at the ground, if I look at the sky, everywhere I see Christ. It's like there's a million clones of Christ. Not just a million, but an infinite amount. So it's a technique that allows the mind absorb something that is almost impossible for the mind to absorb, and that is the sense of God's infinite presence. There's no place where you will not find Christ. There's no room, there's no hiding place. There is no walkway, city bus, club, cafe, restaurant, hospital room. There is nowhere you will not find Christ. He's everywhere. And this Buddhist meditation, the way it always ends, is very similar because during it, when you have focused on the Buddha before you, you focus on that image, but also you kind of bring to mind the idea that there are an infinite amount of those images everywhere. The cosmos is full of Buddha. Another beautiful image is that, on every speck of dust or on every atom, there are 1,000,000 Buddhas. And that's very similar sometimes to the way that Christians in the early church used to talk about angels, and the way they talk about angels in Islam. Angels is a kind of a force, like light, that just can cross the universe in an instant, and that they exist in infinite numbers. So when you're coming to the end of that kind of meditation, you're saying to yourself, well, in your meditation, your visualization is something that you dissolve. You dissolve it into the air. You dissolve it into the clouds on which the Buddhas were sitting. You just dissolve the whole thing into cloud. And then you finally allow that cloud to dissolve into yourself. This cloud of merit that is now not, you're not visualizing it any longer as images of Buddha, but the Buddhas have actually melted into the cloud, and they now are this big cloud sitting in front of you. And you then visualize that cloud entering you and dissolving into yourself. And now the Buddha is within you. I get a great joy, I suppose, out of sharing this with you. I think it's a very, very precious teaching, and I don't know where I'll go with it. I'll come back to this in a couple of weeks' time and do a further meditation on this as practical ways to engage with the Buddha. Non-violence. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.